In old age, like every stage of life, a person confronts a profound question about their own existence. How can one preserve self-awareness when relationships fade and familiar supports slowly vanish? This question does not arise without cause. It emerges as time shows its relentless force, and those who once seemed indispensable gradually leave our lives. Yet, it is precisely in this critical moment that Kant's reflections on moral autonomy, freedom, and the inner lawgiver become especially meaningful. Old age tests those who can maintain an inner connection with themselves, regardless of external circumstances. As Kant emphasized, a person must be a law unto themselves, not a servant to outside influences. In youth, we often overlook this because our happiness depends on others, family, friends, partners. But in old age, that dependence begins to dissolve. It may not reveal every connection, but it shows which ones are truly valuable and which are mere illusions. This clarity comes when children leave home, friends drift apart, and spouses grow distant. Those once seen as supports often prove to be temporary companions. As Kant stated, the only true support is one's own moral strength. In other words, in old age, we must learn to rely not on what is fleeting, but on what endures within us. Kant calls this the autonomy of the mind, the human capacity to act according to an inner moral law, independent of external circumstances. This leads to the four pillars that form the foundation of life in old age. The first is the ability to be alone without feeling lonely or miserable. Kant viewed being alone not as mere isolation, but as a necessary condition for inner freedom. He emphasized, man must learn to live within himself, for the external world cannot grant true happiness. As we grow older and external relationships fade, it becomes essential to build an inner connection with ourselves. Without learning to be alone, life becomes an empty space filled only with chaos. Those who cannot find peace in their own presence grow dependent on others, and life loses its meaning because it is not guided by an inner principle. Being alone does not mean rejecting social relationships. Rather, it is freeing oneself from their deceptive importance. A person must release dependence on the external world to discover true happiness within. For instance, a woman lives alone in a quiet apartment. Each evening, she sits by the window with a book and a cup of tea. She does not escape solitude. Instead, she fills it with meaning. This, as Kant emphasized, is true freedom. When someone can live in harmony with themselves, they are no longer swayed by external circumstances. Those unafraid of being alone experience solitude not as misery, but as genuine freedom. The second key is an orderly daily routine. Kant notes that order in everyday life not only simplifies existence, but also lays the foundation for moral growth. Human life cannot be truly free without order. This is particularly important in old age, as the chaos of the external world can disturb inner peace. Order in daily life is not merely about tidying one's apartment or organizing belongings. It is primarily about creating inner order, the foundation of moral principles. By ordering their surroundings, a person also organizes their mind. A tidy home reflects a pure soul. Consider this example. A woman lives in an apartment with 3 wardrobes filled with unnecessary items. Old clothes, a broken ceiling light, keepsakes she cannot part with. Kant writes, attachment to the past, frozen in things, becomes a burden that hinders progress into the future. In old age, when time no longer allows for correcting past mistakes, it is vital to let go of the past to preserve energy for the present. Kant emphasized that purity is essential for the development of freedom. Those who cannot organize their daily life cannot cultivate inner freedom either. Thus, order in everyday life is the first step toward following the moral law. The third pillar is indifference to the judgment of others. Kant explains that true freedom is acting independently of others' opinions. Freedom is the ability to act according to one's own inner law, not to seek others' approval. In old age, as external ties weaken and the body loses strength, one must accept that others may not understand them, and that their life may no longer align with others' standards. Those who learn to disregard these judgments gain freedom. Kant writes, "One must learn to say no to the opinions of others in order to preserve one's moral integrity." For example, a neighbor argues with his wife every evening but claims to be happy. Kant observes that the opinions of others are merely reflections of their own fears, not expressions of true happiness. As one grows older and realizes that others cannot fully understand them, it becomes necessary to live by one's own moral compass. The purest form of respect emerges when one quietly accepts oneself, and that, Kant teaches, is true freedom. Having to justify nothing, prove nothing. Simply living according to what one believes is right. The fourth pillar is fidelity to oneself. The deepest form of freedom. A person must feel that their life has meaning, and this meaning must come from their own moral consciousness. As one ages and others may no longer rely on them, it becomes even more important to preserve the sense that one's existence still matters. This is not about money, praise, or recognition, but about the inner feeling that each day counts. Kant said the meaning of life does not lie in living with others, but in living with oneself. For example, a woman put on lipstick every morning, even though she knew no one would visit her. She made herself coffee just to enjoy the scent of the morning. Sometimes she read poems to her cat. These may seem trivial, but such small acts gave her life reality and depth. Some people grow tomatoes on their balcony not for the harvest, but for the care involved. Others do gymnastics in the morning to keep their bodies flexible. Still others jot down thoughts in a small notebook so that the day does not pass unnoticed. Doing something for oneself creates rhythm, and the day loses its emptiness. If a person does not feel important or recognize their own value, their life becomes hollow. As long as someone finds no meaning in their existence, they remain trapped in insignificance. Therefore, especially in old age, when external relationships fade, it is crucial to find meaning in one's own actions. For Kant, as for every philosopher seeking to understand the essence of human life, the focus was never only on the external, but above all on inner freedom, independence from external conditions. Old age is the moment when a person, confronted with the fading of external bonds, can cultivate a stronger inner freedom. Herein lies the true power of aging. It reveals that genuine freedom does not depend on external circumstances, but on the depth of one's connection with oneself. As Kant said, freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the ability to act according to one's own laws. Those who succeed in strengthening these four pillars achieve a freedom that forms the foundation of their life. Those who fail, however, experience a life that, as Kant wrote, is an empty space filled only with chaos. Thus, old age is not an end, but the beginning of a new phase, a time in which a person must learn to rely on themselves. As Kant stated, man must be a law unto himself, not a slave to external influences.